Please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. When I started college in the fall of 1997, it was the first time I'd been away from home for any length of time. I'd been a good student in high school, and I was determined to keep up my record of academic success throughout college. In my mind, that meant saying no to most of the social activities that presented themselves. Life on a residential college campus is incredibly busy with countless groups and events all vying for one's time and attention. For many students, the temptation is too great, and they end up focusing most or all of their time and energy on social activities to the detriment of their studies. Temptation for me was the exact opposite. As those first days of life on campus turned into weeks, I limited my social engagement to spending time with my roommates and having conversation over meals in the cafeteria. I devoted most of my time to my studies, as I felt that was incredibly important. It was incredibly important for me to be a good steward of my time and the investment of my family and the school in my education. There were times in those weeks when things became too busy and too noisy in my room to be able to study. One of my roommates loved playing video games, and it seemed like most of the other guys on our hall loved watching him play video games. I would quietly take my books and head down to the laundry room in the dorm's basement. There were several tables and chairs there, and it was empty most of the time. After a few weeks, one of the guys on my hall pulled me aside. He was a sophomore, a year ahead of me, and one of the more socially engaged guys on campus. He asked me how I was settling into life on campus. "I'm doing okay, I think," was my response. "Are you getting to know others?" he asked. "Sure," I said. "I've made a lot of new friends since I got here." "Are you making time to do some fun things as well as study?" That question caught me a bit off guard. "Sure," I replied. "I'm just trying to be careful to put my studies first." "Just remember, there's a balance to be found," he said. "You came here for an education, and that can't be found just in books and classes." Those words stuck with me and served as a reminder to me that I needed to say yes to some of those invitations to fun. Finding a balance between doing what we need to do and taking care of ourselves is often hard. We see it play out in Jesus' own life throughout the Gospels, but most clearly in Mark's Gospel. From the very first sentence, Mark's story begins at a frantic pace, and it won't slow down until the very last sentence. The author's favorite way to start a sentence is "and immediately." We're rushed from one scene to another with virtually no time to breathe or process what we've just experienced. Jesus knows that pace well, according to Mark, because from the very first moment he came on the scene, he's seldom able to escape the attention of the crowds. They hear of his ability to heal and of his engaging and authoritative style of teaching, and they immediately chase him through Palestine. They literally chase him the whole gospel. They won't leave him until those final moments when he's sentenced to death. Until then, they seek him constantly and demand virtually every waking moment. We see that illustrated in today's reading. Jesus and the disciples have just left the synagogue where Jesus has set free a man who was bound by an unclean spirit. They head to the house of Simon and Andrew, likely next door to the synagogue, and immediately they're confronted with the news that Simon's mother-in-law is sick with a fever. And without a second thought, Jesus goes to her. Defying ritual laws about purity, Jesus takes her by the hand and heals her. She's so grateful she immediately gets up and offers hospitality to Jesus. This should be an opportunity for Jesus to rest and enjoy the company of Simon and Andrew and their family. Sadly, it won't last. Word about Jesus' ability to heal spreads to every corner of Capernaum, and by sundown, when the Sabbath is over, the whole house is completely surrounded by people pleading for help and healing. Jesus doesn't turn anyone away, but heals as many as he can before exhaustion takes over. Early the next morning, while it's still dark, before the crowds can reassemble, Jesus slips away from the house alone, and he heads into the wilderness outside of the town. And there he tries to get some quiet time alone, time to pray and refocus his energies. The needs confronting him are far greater than he ever realized, and he's begun to understand how much will be required of him, and it's completely overwhelming. But before Jesus even has time to take a breath, the disciples track him down. Literally, that verb is they hunted him down and reminded him that the whole town is searching for him still. The needs will not be ignored. And then, in this decisive moment that will define Jesus' ministry, Jesus looks at the disciples and tells them that they must move on to other areas. I must proclaim the message of God's kingdom there too. That's why I came. Jesus isn't ignoring the needs of those who seek him out. He's simply making a decision to guard his time and his life right now in that moment. God's kingdom brings healing and wholeness, but it's bigger than just those two signs. It's about the transformation of the whole person that leads to the renewal of the world. Physicians can heal, and they will. Jesus will not only heal, he will teach others how to heal, and not just lives, but communities and the earth itself. These moments that Jesus takes to be alone and to pray, to remember who he is and what he's called to do, they are a reminder that the demands of life can wear all of us to exhaustion. Isaiah says that God never grows tired or weary, but Genesis says that even God needed a rest after creation. Taking the time to care for ourselves and to put healthy boundaries in place is important for all of us. It's holy and it's good. That's the message that these verses that Isaiah offers that we read today are trying to communicate. To a people weary from years of exile and tired of looking for signs of hope that God is doing something to restore them, the prophet offers words of patience, words that call for renewal and rest. Step away from the worry for a while. Trust that God is at work, even if God's time doesn't align with human desires. The God who created the universe, who called your ancestors, has walked with you through every struggle you have faced. God has not abandoned you. God will never forsake you. Be patient. Take care of yourselves in these difficult days and know that God will bring healing and renewal through that rest. The Apostle Paul offers a reminder that God will meet us where we are, in whatever circumstances of life we find ourselves, in exhaustion, in frustration, in despair. The purpose of all our efforts is to bring healing and wholeness to the world. And Paul says we can do that by meeting others where they are in their life. He is clear, though, that this isn't something that any of us can accomplish alone, not even the mighty Paul himself. This is a communal effort, one that depends on each of us being good stewards of the life and the gifts we have been given, and on remaining in communion with God through prayer and rest. It's far easier said than done, of course. Each of us feels the needs of the world, of those we love, pressing in on us every moment of every day. We've been trained to think of caring for ourselves as somehow being selfish, but the truth is, as one of my professors in seminary always reminded us, you only have to give what you have within you. When we're exhausted or think that the outcome of any situation rests on us alone, we're left with little within ourselves to give to others. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "The moment you wake up in the morning, all your wishes and hopes for the day rush at you like a wild animal. And the first job each morning consists in shoving it all back, in listening to that other voice, taking that other point of view, letting that other larger, stronger, quieter life come flowing in." In early 2017, when the nation was reeling from the outcome of the 2016 election and the full brunt of its impact was only just beginning to be felt, a friend who worked in the federal government came to me and confessed that he felt like he was on the verge of a breakdown. "I don't feel like I can take a breath," he said. "It's all day, every day at work, and then I come home and it's right there on the news all evening. My whole life is being absorbed by this chaos." We talked for a few minutes and I shared how I was also feeling overwhelmed and that I thought that most of us felt that sense of exhaustion and despair. In the course of that conversation, we both realized that part of the problem was that we were consuming a nonstop diet of news and commentary on the news. The situation was grave, but it was being made far worse by the fact that we couldn't catch our breath in the face of it. It was just a few days before Lent, and my friend and I made a pact that night. For the whole season of Lent, we agreed to limit our intentional intake of news to 30 minutes a day and then only from NPR or PBS, sources that offered news without the hyperbole and the angst of cable news outlets and social media. A few weeks later, my friend and I met for lunch and discussed how much improved her whole mindset was as a result of taking a break from cable news and social media. "I think I just needed a rest to get myself back on level ground," my friend said. The last 4 years have been really hard. The last year has been exceptionally hard on all of us, especially here at St. John's. We need to take a deep breath. We need to rest and renew and remember who we are and whose we are. Life is about finding balance. The needs that we face are exhausting and the challenges are overwhelming. Jesus knew that, and that's why he called disciples to share the work. It's also why he put boundaries in place and stepped away from the crowds for a while. They weren't going anywhere. In fact, they only grew as his ministry continued. Taking the time to rest, to breathe, to refocus, to remember who he was and what he was called to do, allowed him to be more fully present with those who were in need. It enabled him to be a better teacher, empowering those who came seeking help to become healers themselves. That's how we bring healing and wholeness to the world. We strive for balance and good stewardship of our lives. So, friends, don't be afraid to slip away for a little while for some rest and renewal. Even Jesus needed to. Amen.